Good morning. First, we do have to deal with some breaking news. Today's show is about mental illness for the most part, but there was breaking news last week, and I'll tell you, if I had false teeth, they'd be on the floor right now because I was shocked. I was shocked to hear about the Broward County coward. We hear all the time from people who defend the Second Amendment that a good guy with a gun will defeat a bad guy with a gun. That's what we need. Well, the Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida had what they thought was a good guy with a gun. The sad thing is, the good guy with a gun was afraid to engage the killer. He stood outside listening as 17 innocent people lost their lives. He stood outside listening to gunfire and screams of innocent children and teachers as they were shot with an AR-15. Why? Well, we're not sure. There's an investigation going on. But I will say this. There were teachers in that school that did not have any badge or any gun who threw themselves in front of a bullet knowing they were going to die to protect their students. And the person that was trained and paid to protect those students hung out outside, cowered behind a wall. You know, I don't know what's going on down there in Florida, but if I lived in Broward County, I would be worried right now. I would be worried that if I call 911, am I going to get a hero or am I going to get a coward? Because if I'm in danger and I call 911, I want a hero. The coward can stay home. This was no rent-a-cop. This was a deputy of the Broward County Sheriff's Department, a veteran of 30 years. Now, Sheriff Israel, the head honcho down there, they want him to resign. And he's like, no, I gave him a badge. I gave him the training. This isn't my responsibility. Well, you know what, dude? You're the head guy. It is your responsibility. In a case like this, the shit moves up. It goes uphill. It does. Because if you have a police force or a sheriff's department and you have people on that department that refuse to do their job that you're paying them for, this deputy sheriff, I don't know what they get paid, but I'm assuming probably it's more than a teacher. And the very essence of their job is to protect and serve, which means that they're supposed to be running toward danger while everybody else runs out. The very essence, the very description of their job when they get that badge and that gun is that they will put their life on the line for innocent civilians. And this dude didn't do that. This Scott Peterson guy, he did not do that. And that means that at the end of the day, whoever his commanding officer is also must take responsibility that he was employing a coward that allowed 17 innocent people to lose their lives. And again, we'll never know. We'll never know because for all intents and purposes, this deputy could have gone into the school and been shot dead on the spot. Who knows? Or he could have gotten a shot off and injured the killer, which would have given people more time to get out. We'll never know. At the end of the day, though, teachers were willing to die for these students, while the person who took an oath to die for these students decided, I don't want to die today. I'm outmaneuvered with an AR-15. I'm not even going to try. Let's talk about 9/11. Firefighters going into the Twin Towers, knowing that they weren't going to put the fire out. But they thought there were people up there that needed their help, and they went into that building, they raced up those stairs, and they did bring people out. And then they went back because they wanted to make sure they left no innocent civilian behind, and those firefighters lost their lives. They knew they were up against extreme odds that they were going to make it home to their families that night, but they did it anyway. That is what we want from people who swear on an oath and carry a badge and a gun or drive a fire truck or have training. We want them to risk their lives for us because that's their job. And of course, we pray for them. We pray that they will come home to their families every night. But they and their families know that when they walk out the door, there is that chance they won't come home. But the reason that deputy was there was to make sure all those kids and those teachers who just went to school to educate and to be educated, to make sure that they did get home to their families, because they never took that oath. They never said, I'm going to be a teacher. I might die today. A student might kill me today. When a parent puts their child on a school bus, they expect them to come home because they don't believe they're sending them into danger, and yet now we know they are. We talk about arming teachers. I don't know, maybe it is a good idea, because it sounds to me like in this situation, the teachers had more balls than the trained sheriff's deputy, the coward of Broward County. Now, I'm going to say something, because the show today is basically about mental illness, and I'm going to say something that's going to surprise you, and I've never done it before, and I don't know that I'll ever do it again, but I now, because of something that I heard over the weekend, I believe that 18 lives could have been saved on February 14th, and I'm including the killer in that. While I hate what the killer did, I am now starting to turn my hatred toward what made him who he became, because he had help. I heard a 911 call that was deeply disturbing. It was from the killer before he became a killer. He was just an angry, scared, sad kid who had just lost his mom. On the 911 call, he admitted that he did a bad thing. He punched in a wall of the home he was staying at. And he was claiming he was a victim because they kicked him out of the house, which of course anybody would. But the 911 operator had such an opportunity. And she almost got it. Almost got it if she had just listened and heard. Because what she said was, you punched in their wall. He said yes. And he's not screaming. He's not hysterical. Very calmly, he said yes. He said, I lost my mom a few weeks ago. And I'm not handling it well. And I got upset. I'm having a hard time right now. Right there. That was a cry for help from a killer before he became a killer. And it was an opportunity for that 911 operator not to send the cops with guns drawn to the house, but to send some sort of help to this child who was begging for it. I'm having a hard time. I just lost my mom. I don't have anybody. And I got mad and I hit a wall. And they didn't do anything. They didn't listen. This is the problem with mental health in our society. I'm going to give you all a homework assignment tonight, after you watch this show in its entirety, of course. Check your health insurance policy and look under mental illness or mental health care. See what kind of benefits your health insurance provides. Some of you may report back to me tomorrow that you have great coverage. Everything's covered. Good for you, because most of us out here have nothing. Oh yeah, we can get our pap smears and our prostate exams and our mammograms and our physicals, and our kids can go to the doctor once a year to get their physicals to go to school and their vaccines. But if your child needs to see a psychiatrist or some sort of mental health professional, good luck. I have viewers who have reported to me on other shows that I've done on mental illness that they know their child needs to see someone. but they can't afford it. Psychiatrists and psychologists don't come cheap. And of course, then we have the drugs, the medication for mental illness. And just like cancer, which we talk about a lot, the treatment is many times worse than the disease. The author, Danielle Steele, I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She writes romance novels. Her beautiful 19-year-old son killed himself. He had bipolar disorder. And when he was on his meds, he lived what society considers perfectly normal. But the side effects of those drugs made him unable to function the way he wanted to. He was in a haze all the time, could barely get out of bed. These side effects were so horrific that he chose to die rather than to live the rest of his life on these drugs. And let's make no mistake, mental illness isn't like strep throat. You go, you get your pills, you take them, you get better. Mental illness is forever. So imagine a 19-year-old kid being given drugs that make him unable to be who he is, to live the life he wants to live, and to know that for the next 60 years, however long he lives, he will be on those drugs. And he couldn't do it. And he committed suicide. And I think that is very sad. I would hope, just like I always call for better cancer treatments that don't kill all of you when they kill the cancer cells, I also would hope that someone out there somewhere is trying to design medication that helps mentally ill people live normal lives without destroying who they are, who they want to be. And that's the other problem with mental illness. We see that there's something wrong. But the person who is sick, it's not like, oh, I have a sore throat. It's not going away. Maybe it's strep. I better get to the doctor. Someone with mental illness thinks that we're all crazy and that they're normal. There's nothing wrong with me. You guys just don't get me. I'm different, but I'm not crazy. The very definition of mental illness is the person who is suffering from it will not accept or admit they are sick because they think everything's fine. Their brain doesn't fire the way our brains fire. So what their brain says to them is, you all out there are the problem, and I'm just fine. Thank you very much. We talk about arming our teachers with weapons that will kill students, that would end a mass shooting. I suggest we arm our teachers with tools to help these children before they become monsters. Now look, I'm not going to try to shame this school because they've been through a lot, but they did what a lot of schools do. This kid was a problem. They didn't know what to do with him, so they kicked him out and made him somebody else's problem. And of course, then he turned around and became their problem once again. Wouldn't it have been lovely? We have all these doctors in our country that volunteer, Doctors Without Borders, and they go down to foreign countries and give their services free to foreign people and foreign children. Wouldn't it be great if a group of psychologists would volunteer a couple days a week to work and help American children in our schools? That schools be armed with a tool of a trained professional mental health counselor, a psychologist, even a psychiatrist. That when a child, and this was a child, he just turned 18 before the shooting. When he was expelled from school, he was a minor, a child. Since we know that some health insurance plans don't cover psychiatric care and psychologists, have one at the school that any child who becomes a risk or that a teacher is concerned about or is having problems with their studies, with home problems, with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they need someone to talk to. A safe place to go in their school to talk and to be heard. I think that would be so much more effective and so much kinder than just giving every teacher an AR-15 to put in a locked closet in their classroom to blow a kid's head away if they come in with a gun. I don't think teachers make enough money for that. But I do think that many teachers, and we saw this in Parkland, they love their students. They care so much about them. And they don't just care that they're being educated. They care about who they are and that they're doing okay at home and that they're not sad about something. They talk them out. And somehow this kid fell through the cracks. Could he have been helped? Could his life have been saved? And along with that, 17 other innocent lives spared? We will never know because nobody tried. Nobody listened. Yes, sadly, mental illness is a stigma that many parents don't want. They don't want to admit that their child needs help because, it's going to follow them the rest of their lives. Well, to those parents who feel this way, would you rather the stigma of being under the care of a trained therapist or maybe on some medication? Would you rather that stigma follow them, or would you rather they be on death row for murdering 17 innocent people? What's worse? I think the latter is worse. Parents are never ashamed to come out and say, my child has cancer and I can't afford the treatment. I'm starting a GoFundMe account. I need help. I'm going to do an auction and people are going to donate things and I need money to pay my child's cancer medical bills. How many GoFundMe accounts have you seen from parents who say, my child needs mental health care? They have a disease just like cancer. It's incurable and we need help because my child can live a normal life if given the proper care, but I can't afford it. Can anybody out there help me with donations? How many of those do you see on Facebook and on the internet? You don't. Because they are so ashamed to admit that their child is mentally ill. Even though we know deep in our hearts that mental illness is as much of a disease as cancer. And yet it is still something to be ashamed of. There are parents out there that would prefer their child is gay, and these are heavily religious people. I'd rather have a gay child than a mentally ill child. And I'm talking about people who have a problem with gay rights and gay people. To them, having a mentally ill child, a child whose brain doesn't work the way everybody else's does, is worse than cancer. Some parents say, I wish my kid had cancer, rather than bipolar. Both are deadly. Both will kill your children if they are not treated. And on one hand, we have young people whose parents don't want them to have chemotherapy. We have the courts forcing them to give their children chemotherapy, but no one is forcing these parents of mentally ill children to get them help, and no one is offering them help. The public school systems in our country give so many freebies away. They give free breakfast. They give free lunch to some kids who can afford to pay because they don't want the poor kids to feel bad. They have English as a second language. They have after-school programs because the kids have nowhere to go after school because their parents are working. Excuse me. And yet there is nowhere in the schools that we say, let's get a professional psychological counselor in each school. I bet right now there are doctors. Oh, excuse me, I swallowed wrong. That's so attractive. I'm sorry, it's a live show. There are doctors out there right now, and I'd like to hear from some of them, if you're listening, that would gladly volunteer a few days a week to talk to students who are considered at risk, who are having some problems coping, either with their studies, with their peers, at home. Maybe parents just got divorced. Something's going on. They broke up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They're sad. They're depressed. Being depressed doesn't mean you're mentally ill, but it can lead to you doing something that you can't ever take back. So if someone like this killer who cried out for help in that 911 call and nobody listened, if these kids had someone who would listen to them and actually hear what they're saying, we might not need to be fighting about gun laws. We might not need to be fighting about cowards of Broward County. People whose job it is to save us, who decide to save themselves instead. We wouldn't be talking about this anymore. And 18 lives would have been spared, because at one point, and this is going to sound strange coming from me, as angry as I was last week, at one point this killer was an innocent child, just like his victims. He could have been as educated and articulate and well-spoken as the kids we see on the TV every day. He could have been like David Hogg. He could have been able to speak out, to have a future as bright as the kids he went to school with when he was one of them. But somehow he fell through the cracks. The system failed him too, along with his victims. And I submit to you, and you can all comment on this, and I'll be anxious to read the comments. I submit that this child was not born a monster. He wasn't born a killer. A lot of people helped make him one. A lot of laws and rules and rights and crap about HIPAA and all kinds of stuff all contributed to ending his life just as he ended the 17 innocent people he killed. Their lives, their futures. There was a point in this killer's life where he could have been saved. And if just somebody had listened, if somebody had heard, all of these kids would still have their futures, as would the killer. Political Paula, out.